فوق الأعناق, when he instructed the angels to hit the unbelievers above the neck. And I said to him, above the neck is probably the brainstem. So if somebody wants to die immediately, they open their mouth, put the gun there, and hit the brainstem, and then you'll be instantly dead. Don't do it at home, but this is what, yeah. But this is what the brainstem. Now, Abada might say to you, oh, if your brainstem is dead, doesn't mean you are dead. This is take you back to the soul. The soul didn't leave the body, so if the brainstem gone, are you dead? Has the spirit left the body? Because we have the things which is religious, the spirit leaving the body. Or we have things which is medical, the body unfunctional anymore. But will it be a reversible unconsciousness or not? I mean, the longest was in vegetative state was 16 years. So Allah Azza wa Jalla said, أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَتَكُونَ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ يَعْقِلُونَ بِهَا. So here, what are you using to make sense of things? Is it your heart? Is it your ears? Is it your skin? Is it your chest? Many ayahs telling us different things. This ayah, you understand using your hearts, understand using your ears. This ayah, الله نزل أحسن الحديث كتابا متشابها مثانية تقشعر منه جلود الذين يخشون. Now your skin interacting, you understand with your skin. ثم تلين جلودهم وقلوبهم. Then your skin and your heart soften. So it seems the spirit use most of the organs to show it's affected. And could be your chest here. فَمَنْ يُرِدُ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَهْدِيَهُ يَشْرَحْ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ. If Allah will make his chest open, accept. And if you are tight, we'll say, my chest is tight. وَمَنْ يُرِدْ أَنْ يَضِرَّهُ يَجْعَلْ صَدْرَهُ ضَيِّقًا حَرَجًا. His chest become too tight. So the spirit using the body, the heart, the skin, the chest, the ears, the eyes, the inner you, the core of you is your spirit. But it loses all the body. But if you lose a limb, you don't lose your body. If you have a heart transplant, you don't change. People get very excited when they have a new heart, but not because they have a new personality. Because they are so excited they are living again. Because the heart is the organ which you need all your life, and your brain. Not all your brain. Some people lose parts of the brain and still alive. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Again, the hearts are locked. They are not understanding. But Allah did not say your spirit is in your heart. He didn't say it's in your chest. He didn't say it's in your brain. He didn't say, although the ayah said in your neck. So, but Allah Azza wa Jalla gave the whole body used by the spirit. Now, he touched on personality again.
Crash Course Philosophy is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace, sharing your passion with the world.
In your day-to-day life, you probably assume a whole bunch of different identities. You might be a sister to your brother, a daughter to your parents, a colleague to your coworker, a mentor to the kids you teach. Or you might think of your identity as being based on your interests, your skills, or things like your gender or ethnicity. Whatever they are, I bet you think of your identities as being pretty fixed, stable, and you like them that way. And if that's the case, I'd like you to meet this guy, 18th century Scottish philosopher David Hume. Because he says you're wrong. Hume argued that the idea of the self doesn't persist over time. He said there is no you that is the same person from birth to death. He said the concept of the self is just an illusion. This could be either liberating or terrifying, depending on how you look at it. I mean, if you don't have an identity, you don't have to worry about identity theft. But what does it mean for my understanding of myself and for the people I love if there is no single constant me? If that's the case, then the person I'm married to is literally not the person I fell in love with or made those vows to, which would suggest that I don't need to keep those vows, and neither does she. And what about personal responsibility? How can you hold someone accountable for their actions if they're not the same person now that they were before? And how can you be responsible for something that you did if you're always changing? This is gonna get dicey. you joined me last time when we talked about personal identity, you'll remember that we considered two main possibilities for what might preserve you as the same person over time. One approach was the body theory, the sort of go-to view of things, which holds that you remain you over time because you just occupy the same body from birth to death. And the other was John Locke's memory theory, the view that your memories are what makes you the same person over time. I'm me because I remember being me in the past. But both of these models have some problems. No matter how much we want the idea of permanent, persistent selves to be a thing, David Hume said they just aren't. For him, it was really a no-brainer. If having a certain identity means possessing the same set of properties, he said, then how could anyone really maintain the same identity from one moment to the next? I clearly don't share all of the same properties of my childhood self or even of myself before I shaved today, so Hume would say that it's silly to pretend that I'm still me. But I feel like me, so what did Hume think was going on? Hume said the so-called self is just a bundle of impressions consisting of a zillion different things. My body, my mind, and my emotions, preferences, memories, even labels that are imposed on me by others. Think of a box and say it's marked Hank, and then put in that box everything that makes me who I am. My DNA, mannerisms, political leanings, my glasses, the relationships I have with others, the various roles I hold. Then you take away the box. Hume's point is, the self is just shorthand for all the junk in the box, and the fact that there is no box points out that there's no single underlying thing that holds it all together. And meanwhile, some of the stuff in the bundle goes away and new stuff shows up. So if you look at the bundle that is me now and compare it with the bundle that my mom and dad brought home from the hospital, they would be almost completely different. So Hume said we're all just ever-changing bundles of impressions that our minds are fooled into thinking of as constant because they're packaged in these fleshy receptacles that basically look the same from one day to the next. To explore this some more, let's bounce over to the thought bubble for some flash philosophy. Contemporary British philosopher Derek Parfit, probably after watching a Star Trek marathon, posed this thought experiment. Imagine a machine that breaks you down atom by atom, copies all of that information, and transmits it to Mars at the speed of light. Once that information gets to Mars, another machine uses it to recreate you atom by atom, using copies of the same organic stuff that you were composed of here on Earth. The person who wakes up on Mars has all of the same memories and personality as you did, and that person thinks it's you. So here's the question. Is this space travel? Did you travel to Mars? Is the transported person really you? Or was a new being created that happened to correspond to you atom by atom, thought by thought? Now, consider this. What if a new version of the machine is created so that now, instead of destroying your body, it can simply be scanned and all of the information can be recreated on Mars, but the you here on Earth still exists? Now, did you travel or were you just replicated? If you're here on Earth, are you also on Mars? Wow. Yeah. Thanks, Thought Bubble, I think. Parfit agrees with Hume that there isn't such a thing as personal identity over time. So he says, in either case, you didn't travel through space. That's just a new you that shows up on Mars, whether the old you was destroyed or still exists. And you know what? Even if you hopped on a spaceship and flew to Mars the old-fashioned way, it'd still be a new you that arrives because you would have experienced all sorts of changes during the trip. But the thing is, Parfit thought Hume missed a really important point. Even though there isn't a singular you from birth to death, Parfit says that each of us has a psychological connectedness with ourselves over time. Think about your life as being like a piece of chainmail. The mesh that is your personal identity is made up of lots of separate chains, and those chains intersect at certain points to make up the chainmail. As you follow the timeline of one particular set of links, new links are being created that add to the chain. And as time passes, the links that are farther back in your past slowly start to drop off as they lose their psychological connection to you. So when you stopped loving Dora the Explorer, that link dropped away, and when you discovered that you totally love philosophy, a new link was created. But some chains intersect with that other chain and they have links that persist for a long time, like the love you have for your parents. So Parfit says that, sure, I'm not the same person I was when I was in elementary school, and I won't be the same person when I die. I'm not even really the same person I was when I started this sentence because every experience changes us, at least a little. But parts of me survive the passage of time because they're psychologically connected to my previous selves. And survival is what's important for Parfit. As long as enough of the elements of you persist, you see yourself as relevantly the same, but not...
Now I want to stop here and take you to the next one. There's only 2 slides from the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal continuously say that it's the spirits which come to your body and stay in your body till you die, and the Prophet ﷺ timed that into 120 days. 40 days nutfa, 40 days alaqa, 40 days mudgha, and then the angel come and blow the spirits into you, and that would remain in you till it's taken out the time of death. I'll link it to the next one because they are related.
Crash Course Philosophy is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace, share your passion with the world.
I bet you think you know a person when you see one. For example, I am a person, right? But was I always a person? Was Johann Strauss a person? Or Freddie Mercury? Are they still people? What about a 9-month-old baby? What about a fetus? Or Chewbacca? Or C-3PO? To philosophers, personhood is a technical term. Person doesn't equal human. Human is a biological term. You're human if you have human DNA, that's it. But person is a moral term. For a philosopher, persons are beings who are part of our moral community. They deserve moral consideration. This distinction is really useful, but it kind of complicates things because there might be non-humans that we think deserve moral consideration, and there might be some humans who don't. But the determination of who's a person and who's not is tricky, and the slipperiness of what constitutes a person is at the core of almost every major social debate issue you can think of. Abortion, animal rights, the death penalty, euthanasia. Whether your passion is human rights or robots, science or sociology, you have to get to the bottom of personhood. We're going to do something a little different today and head straight into the thought bubble, because I think there's some flash philosophy that'll help us a lot when we start thinking about what constitutes a person. Is Superman a person? I mean, if you encountered Superman on another planet, the question wouldn't even cross your mind. The way he acts and talks certainly indicates that he's a person. But Supes definitely isn't human. He's Kryptonian, he lacks human DNA, and is affected by the sun and by kryptonite in a way that humans are not. So calling him a human is incorrect, but most of us would disagree with anyone who wanted to deny him personhood. Superman's non-humanity is one of the reasons Lex Luthor hates him, and part of why we hate Lex Luthor. Just because Superman happens to be from another planet doesn't make him different in any moral way, just like skin color doesn't make a moral difference among humans. For the people who know him, Lois and Jimmy and Ma and Pa Kent, there's no question that Superman is a person. In fact, if anything, Superman might be more of a person than Luthor is, because Luthor is fueled by hatred and prejudice and a lust for power. He's less deserving of moral consideration than Superman. So if Superman is more of a person than Lex, then humanity definitely isn't what makes someone a person. So yeah, is Thought Bubble a person? Bye-bye, Thought Bubble. Now, there are plenty of candidates for non-human persons. Aliens like Superman, as well as artificial intelligences like Wall-E or Samantha from the movie Her. Many people think some non-human animals are persons too. Great apes like Coco are a good example. But is it possible to be human yet not a person? Some people believe that fetuses, though clearly human, are not yet persons. Others think that bodies in persistent vegetative states or that have experienced a complete and irreversible loss of brain function are no longer persons either. Still others argue that a human can surrender his or her personhood through grossly inhumane actions like rape or murder. Many careful thinkers disagree about what personhood really is, where it starts and stops, which explains why we disagree about abortion and euthanasia and capital punishment, and I'm sure no one in the comments will be shouting their opinions on the matter at all. But it seems to come down to this question: what must one possess to be part of our moral community, to be deserving of our moral consideration? A contemporary American legal scholar named John Noonan gives us one option. He calls it the genetic criterion. This view says that you are a person if you have human DNA, and you are not a person if you don't. The virtue of this view is its simplicity, but its implications are so problematic that most philosophers dismiss it. If all you need to be a person is human DNA, then like, my mouth cells are persons. And so are corpses. None of our favorite androids or aliens like Superman meet the genetic criterion, even though they seem more like persons than like, some of my cells. But American philosopher Mary Ann Warren offers 5 more specific criteria that she believes together constitute personhood: consciousness, reasoning, self-motivated activity, capacity to communicate, and self-awareness. These 5 factors are known as the cognitive criteria for personhood. Warren argues that some humans just aren't persons, either not yet or not anymore. In her view, if a being is incapable of communicating, isn't aware of itself as a self, can't think or move around on its own, or isn't conscious, then she says that's not a being that we can call a person, even if it happens to have human DNA. Now, you might have noticed that Warren's criteria definitely rules out fetuses, but it also kind of rules out young children. Kids don't become self-aware until at least 18 months. So Noonan's criterion seems to allow some obvious non-persons into its definition, like the cells in my spit, but Warren's criteria may kick out of the personhood club some beings that to you are clearly people. Then maybe you'd find the social criterion more palatable. This view says that you're a person whenever society recognizes you as a person, or whenever someone cares about you. This one seems pretty intuitive. It says that you matter morally when you matter to someone. It allows for society's understanding of a person to change over time, which seems good when we're thinking about something like expanding rights to protect primates, for example. However, if you think carefully about this view, it also means that if no one happens to care for a particular being, that being simply isn't a person. It would mean that fully rational, healthy, functioning adult humans might not have personhood just because no one happens to care about them, and we probably want inclusion in our moral community to be something more than a popularity contest. So then there's contemporary Australian moral philosopher Peter Singer, who says that the key to personhood is sentience, the ability to feel pleasure and pain. This criterion ignores the whole idea of species altogether and instead looks at a being's capacity to suffer. This view says that it's wrong to cause unnecessary pain to anything that can feel, but if it can't feel, well, we do no harm by excluding it from the group of beings that matter. So fetuses younger than at least 23 weeks are not persons, nor are humans in persistent vegetative states, but any animal with a developed central nervous system is a person. Now, some people think that personhood is a right, a sort of ticket to the moral community that you forfeit when you violate the laws of society in a major way. In this view, you can surrender your own personhood through grossly inhumane actions. This line of reasoning is one way people justify capital punishment. Yes, killing people is wrong, they might say, but if a criminal has surrendered their personhood through their actions, then they're no longer a person anymore, so we as members of the state would think ourselves justified in killing them. Now, so far we've been talking about personhood like it's a toggle switch. You have it, or you don't. But a more nuanced option is the gradient theory of personhood, which says it's not all or nothing. It's more like a dimmer switch. So personhood comes in degrees, and you can have more or less of it. So in this view, a fetus would grow slowly in personhood throughout pregnancy as cognition develops. So a 26-week-old fetus would have less personhood than a 34-week-old fetus, which would have less personhood than a newborn baby, who would have less personhood than a toddler. And likewise, personhood can be lost as gradually as it can be gained. A lot of people think this is a reasonable way to look at the issue. For instance, you might think a fetus has some degree of personhood and so deserves moral consideration, but when the fetus is compared with its mother, a being with far more personhood by this logic, then the interests of the being with more personhood gets more weight. So this doesn't deny the personhood of either being, but it allows that some beings have more personhood than others. This stuff is hard to talk about, but that's why we're talking about it, because it merits your attention. Not only does it matter now, as we're studying the concept of personhood for its own sake, but the answers you give to these questions are going to be important later when we're studying ethics. So give it a good long think and try to figure out what you believe constitutes personhood. As you consider the factors that you think are most important, be careful how you cast your net. Make sure you include everyone you think should be included and exclude those you think should be excluded. It's harder than you might think.
In the Quran, subhanAllah, I mean, he talked here about abortion, about euthanasia, death penalty, vegetative state, and so on and so forth. Children, whether it's social criteria, feel pain, pressure. And when you go to the Quran, I mean, here with the conscious and reasoning and self-motivated, when you come to the Quran, that's بل الإنسان على نفسه بصيرة وكان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا. Once you are aware of yourself, you know you are a person. People cannot take it away from you, and you know what you're doing, good or bad. And the human are known to be argumentative, and Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to test them often when they reach the maturity, but they have rights as infant, as often from the birth and onward, and then you give them their family. So he took the maturity, a sign of you are maturing. He didn't take that when you become demented here or very ill, that you lose your personality and you lose yourself, you're not a person anymore. And you have to treat your mom and dad decently when they reach the age when they don't know nothing at all and they can't do much for themselves. And this ayah in my blog, they remain people even without memory, even without personality, without insight, without the self-awareness. And this ayah really very powerful. وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. When Allah Azza wa Jalla will ask the killed baby why she was killed. So Allah considered the baby as a person, and the Prophet ﷺ said al-wa'd al-khafi, when he was asked about outside ejaculation to avoid using contraceptions, he said this is the hidden infanticide thing. Infanticide, yeah. So you're killing the hidden killing of children. When people kill when the abortion, they abort a child, the hidden killing of a child, and the Day of Judgment, obviously, that will be us as well. This is why in Islam, unless there is a immediate risk on the life of the mother, you're not allowed. The last one...
So you're not allowed to have abortions?
No, unless there is a threat to the life of the mother. So you have to say, the mother is more important now or the child. This is the last one. I hope to finish, I said 1.5 hours from 8:15, so we're right on time. And then we'll let you go, but that's the important one. So we're moving into, we have to insist there is a spiritual existence. We're not only materialist. There is a spirit there. The spirit have no gender. The spirit is the person. Once he has the spirit, he's the person. Some scholars say because the spirit come inside the body when the body is 120 days old, not us, the scholars the time of the Sahaba, because they came across a legal issue. If somebody hit a woman on the tummy and she aborted, has he killed a child? Because if you kill an infant in the tummy, if you kill a fetus, you have to pay 10% of the diya. So they said, when will you consider the child a child to pay the diya? And they said once the installment takes place, because before the spirit enters the body, he's not a person. This is our scholars say, our earlier scholar. So if he killed a child after 120 days old, he has to pay 10%. If the child was less than 120 days, he doesn't pay the diya. The diya are 10 camels, if you take the diya at that time, or the money. The Prophet ﷺ took 1,200 dinar as a diya, which is 1,200 dinar, it's 1.2 million pounds, the diya. So the diya could be very expensive.
For what?
For killing a person, the blood money is 1.2 million pounds.
Rasulullah, he took that?
Took 12,000
12.
dinar. 12,000 dinar.
For the killing of who?
A person.
Oh, okay.
Or 100 camel.
Oh, 100.
So if we kill a fetus, it has to be 1,200 dinar, which is
Equivalent, yeah.
120,000 pounds. So they came across that legal issue when we have to force him to pay the diya if he killed a fetus 120 days or older. If less than that, will be different penalty. And this is why when we go and talk about LGBT, we need to stress that this is what the human, either you have to be materialistic and the body is the body, male is male, female is female, stop all this mess and confusion, or you have to accept the religious concept of spirit, which the spirit, male and female, are the same. You can't say I'm a man and a woman, or vice versa. People suggestible. Inshallah, next week we'll bring why people get mixed up, why people have difficulty, what Islam put for us to avoid getting into that trap. Because there's a lot of teaching of the Prophet ﷺ to stop the youngsters and the adults get into that trap.
Crash Course Philosophy is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace, share your passion with the world.
On September 13th, 1848, a freak accident caused an explosion that drove an iron rod straight into the skull of a worker named Phineas Gage. A metal rod almost as tall as he was went through his skull, and he didn't die. But the Phineas from before the accident and the one who lived after it didn't seem to have a lot in common personality-wise. The Phineas with no hole in his brain was a proper hard-working gentleman, and the Phineas with the injured brain was sort of a belligerent jerk. Phineas's brain was changed and his personality changed too. This misfortune has provided lots of fodder for researchers of psychology and neurology, but the case of Phineas Gage holds lessons for philosophers too. It provides us with some rare hard evidence that a part of us that's historically been thought of as non-physical, our personality, is actually directly affected by what happens to us physically. Which raises the question, where does our mind reside? Now, not a lot of contemporary scientists would be all that surprised that an injury like the one Gage suffered could cause such a radical change. That's because the dominant view held in much of Western science is what we call reductive physicalism. This is the view that the world is made only of physical stuff, including us. By this logic, everything about me and you could be explained in terms of our bodies, our brains, hormones, and neurotransmitters. So if everything about Phineas's personality could be explained in terms of his brain, it's no shock that a radical change in his brain would bring about a radical change in his personality. This same belief is at work when a psychiatrist prescribes antidepressants to a patient, change the patient's brain chemistry, change the patient's mood. Now, physicalism may be the default scientific position, but remember way back in episode 5, our old friend René Descartes introduced us to cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Descartes believed that he could cast doubt on the existence of his body, but not the existence of his mind. The fact that he could doubt one but not the other told him he must be made of two different kinds of stuff. This view, known as substance dualism, says the world is made of both physical stuff and mental stuff. Substance dualists say that minds are a separate non-physical substance that cannot be reduced to or explained in terms of physical stuff like brains. And in this view, some things like God are pure mind and other things like rocks are pure matter. But humans, well, we're kind of special. We're the only kind of thing that combines both stuffs into one being, both body and mind. What's more, these two substances appear to interact with each other inside of us. This is called interactionism. When I make up my mind to do something, I have the power to compel my body to do as I please, to get up off the couch and make myself a nice PB&J, for example. What's more, my mental states seem to have the ability to affect my physical states, even against my will. You ever notice how many people who are grieving or under a lot of stress, for example, often get physically sick? Likewise, our bodies also appear to be able to affect our minds, like when you're so hungry you just can't focus on what your teacher is saying at all, or how a pure physical pleasure, like having a good cuddle with your cat, can pull you out of a bad mood. Interactionists say that what's going on with these experiences is that our two substances, minds and bodies, are interacting with each other. But if you think about it, this is actually a pretty puzzling proposition. How can a purely mental thing have any effect on a purely physical thing? The puzzle of how minds and bodies can interact with each other is known as the mind-body problem. This is the problem that makes us wonder, how can my body have a separate entity called a mind lurking inside of it, controlling it and being controlled by it? What would tether my mind to this body in particular? Why couldn't my mind just go running off on its own or take a dip into other bodies to see what it's like in there? Descartes' answer, frankly, was not all that satisfying. He said that the mind is tethered to the body at the pineal gland, located at the base of the brain, and that all mind-body interactions are filtered through that portal, if you will, between the mind and the body. But that really only pushes the problem back without solving it, since the pineal gland is part of the physical body. Many modern philosophers of mind, seeing no way to solve the mind-body problem, have felt compelled to abandon substance dualism altogether. Some are happy to be physicalists, but others are convinced that there are some parts of the human experience that simply can't be boiled down to brains. To see what they think is being left out, let's head over to the thought bubble for some flash philosophy. Contemporary Australian philosopher Frank Jackson presents us with the thought experiment of Mary, a woman who has spent her entire life in a black and white room, learning everything via a black and white television. While locked in this room, Mary becomes a neurophysicist physicist specializing in the science of color. She learns everything there is to know about light, optics, the physics of color, and how it affects our sensory organs, but she has never seen it for herself. So here's the question. When Mary finally walks out of the room and sees color for the first time, has Mary learned something new? Jackson devised this thought experiment as an argument against reductive physicalism. Because, Jackson says, the qualitative experience of seeing a color, say red, isn't the same as knowing facts about red. If everything could be explained in terms of the physical, then when Mary finally saw red, it wouldn't have contributed to her understanding at all. It wouldn't have told her anything that she didn't already know. Thanks, Thought Bubble. What's missing from a physicalist account, many argue, is what are known as qualia, instances of subjective first-person experience. Qualia are what it feels like to stub your toe, or take the first bite out of a slice of pizza, or to learn that you have been deeply betrayed by a trusted friend. It's what Mary is said to gain when she steps out of the room and sees color for the first time. Physicalists respond to thought experiments like Jackson's by arguing that they beg the question. Begging the question, you'll recall, is a philosophical fallacy in which the premises assume the conclusion they're supposed to be proving. Jackson's thought experiment assumes that Mary learns something new when she steps out of the room. But if physicalism is true, and if she really knows everything physical about color, then of course seeing it for herself isn't going to add to her understanding of it in any way. Now, physicalists argue that their case is making progress as we learn more and more about the physical processes of the mind. Well, that's not really satisfying because we want an answer, not a promissory note. But to be fair, physicalists have only been at work for a few decades, while dualists have been bashing their heads against the mind-body problem for centuries. But not everybody falls cleanly into either the physicalist or the dualist camp. The Mary case, and other arguments like it, convince some people that they have to maintain their commitment to dualism even though they can't see a solution to the mind-body problem. Some of those people adopt a view called epiphenomenalism. This view says that physical states can give rise to mental states, but mental states can't affect physical states. So by this thinking, your beliefs, desires, and temperaments do exist, but they have no power over anything physical about you. Which might sound kind of weird and unconvincing. But then there's contemporary British philosopher Colin McGinn, who advocates for a view called Mysterianism. This says the question of consciousness is unsolvable by human minds. It's not that McGinn thinks we're dummies. He thinks humans are natural knowers, just give us a problem and we can figure it out. But not this. The reason, he says, is that our brains are compartmentalized. The way we understand our mind is through reflection. It's deeply personal and subjective. But the way we understand our brains and bodies is objective and verifiable. And those two modes of understanding just don't mix. No amount of reflection could lead to any claims about neurons firing, and no amount of empirical research is going to give rise to what it's like to see color through someone else's eyes. Our brains just don't have a compartment that can piece together those different modes of evidence. The mind-body problem hasn't been solved, and physicalism hasn't been proven, because both of those things require brains to do something they can't do. So what do you think? Is your mind a separate substance riding around in your body until it dies? Can the complicated thing that is you, that thinks and feels and desires and hurts, be reduced to a purely physical thing? Did Mary learn something new? Is it possible to know? Well, that is up to your mind to figure out. Today, we talked about theories of where the mind resides. We learned about reductive physicalism, substance dualism, and Mysterianism. And
Right, okay. Now the problem they have, this is why it's intermingled with psychiatry as well. You're born as an infant, no knowledge at all, pure spirit. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, Abawahu Yahwidani or Nasrani or Majisani, his own parents, make him, will be born pure on instinct belief, on fitra, and then become Christian, Jew, or Majus. So the effect of parents. Then you have the effect of the community, obviously, schools and colleges and friends and neighbors, whatever. The effect of knowledge, and the effect of experiences, and also the effect of diseases. And the problem here, diseases, when it is psychiatric illness, they started with this guy who had the hit. The road went through his brain. Now, when the brain producing less hormones, you become depressed, producing a lot of hormones, become manic. You might have addiction to something, you might have an anxiety, you have different hormone also secreted, whatever. You have damaged part of the brain, makes person like have psychopathic tendency, or somebody become criminal suddenly, or there are cases, somebody had tumor. they took him to prison because he molested his own daughter, and then they found that he has tumor. They removed the tumor. All this temptation is gone. So he became normal, no problem with his behavior. And then his pressure to abuse children came back, and they found there's tumor again. It came, and they removed it. But then you have to recognize you have the spirit leading the body. The spirit leading the body. It has to be perfect body to be perfect person. And you can't. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was perfect person. There were a lot of stresses, a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties. He was orphaned, double orphaned, attacked, whatever. Spirit is strong. You control the body. Now we have the most difficult thing in psychiatry is personality disorder. Even personality disorder doesn't come born with it. They develop it. And the same with the homosexuality and lesbian, they develop it. They don't become born homosexual. They develop it, and we take them to something called therapeutic community. It works. With the most difficult sometimes personality disorder, it does work. If you consider the person pure, you have a pure spirit, you have pure soul, but you have the wrong body. Your body is not helping you to behave well. All these experiences, illnesses, parents, community, but it takes months. And they usually take them to live in a community, therapeutic community, and exposed to nice stuff and good support and tolerance and some medication, sometime whatever. So back to square one, you have the body and you have the soul. Now the soul, it seems that Allah Azza wa Jalla said in the Quran, مَا مِن دَابَّةٍ إِلَّا هُوَ آخِذٌ بِنَاصِيَتِهَا. So you have the body, the bird, moving from cold area to hot area through what? The body cannot himself follow even the what they say, the magnetic field of the earth. So we'll go through this, and but how the birds are moving, what they do, the birds, before they move, they make like a display. And they don't hit each other. They don't collide with each other. And they have beautiful displays sometimes and show. And amazing. Like if they are doing rehearsal to follow a pathway from A to B. And they follow this display. It's amazing. And the same the fish when they go in group, and the same when you see the ants moving in rows. And so they floated the idea that you have